Okay, we're gonna talk today about one subject that is very important to Prosper, is how the kernel of Prosper works and how you as developers, as Prosper experts, can work with Prosper. We have around 127 plus tables in Prosper. What we do when you load Prosper at the beginning, we create a row of every table in memory. So we allocate in memory a row for every table. This is for table 1, for table 2, for table 3, till 1 table 27. Okay? This is what the kernel does. It allocates a row in memory for every table. This is the table UID, so I know what table is it. And every table has its columns. Always the UID is always the first column, right? The UID, because it's a Prosper table, the UID is always the first column. But we're allocating one memory row per table. Why do we do that? We do that for various reasons. Let me remove this part, and I want to call this the memory representation for every row in every table. We give you event functions. For example, an event function that is called Sql Select. An event function that's called Sql Select. What does it do? It takes a UID and a table UID, and it will go to SQL, will select the corresponding row from that table, and will fill it in the memory representation of that table. So it will take a UID of a row, a table, and will fill it. How does it do that? This will go and will execute exec a table cell, whatever the table is. This is the table, a stored procedure that is found in the database that takes a single parameter, which is the UID. This is the UID that you are passing, and this is the table that you are passing. It will go and execute this query. Once it executes that query, the results of that query is only a single select. Since the UID is unique, it says select star from table, for example, standard item, project, document, type, whatever you want to. Select star from this table where UID equals to this value. It's very fast select. It will go and get it and come back. Where does the output of this is stored? It's stored in one of these rows. So let's say it's stored in the corresponding row in memory. Okay? So this is what the Sql Select does. It will go to the database, it will get a row, and will fill it, will put it in memory. When you use the column, when you use the function SQL column, what does it do? It takes the table and it takes the column. For example, if I tell you, get me the value of the SQL column from the document type UID, it will go and get the document type UID column from the table document and will put it in, will store it in some memory, another memory variable. Okay? But you tell me, this works all the time. It doesn't matter what's in that column. So it is your responsibility as a configurator to make sure to fill that column before, because this SQL table column, where it's going to this table, to this column, to this specific column, and getting its value, copying its value and bringing it back to this place where you want to store it. Okay? We're only working memory here. Only the SQL Select went and got something from the database. It filled it in that row. Okay? The SQL column will get you any column from that table and will give you the value for that column. You can store it anywhere you want to. You can store it in a register, you can store it in another column, or anywhere in this table. So you're moving something from here to here or from here to here. You have to make sure, the only thing that you have to make sure of is that the data type are aligned. For example, when you say, if you're getting a type UID from the document table, you cannot store it in a non-UID column. You have to, because its value is an integer, a 4-byte integer. You have to store it in a 4-byte integer. So this, you have to make sure that the value that you are storing it in matches equally that value. In string, it doesn't matter. A string can fit in any other string, but in integer or decimal or date, you have to respect the type. Okay. But what if you want to get a value from the database, from one column of one type, and convert it to another value, store it in something that is not the same type? You know that it is the, so you can say, you can run the convert function. The convert function that will take, or it's not called SQL, it's called convert to. It's called convert to. The convert to function takes a value from here and will store it in another value by doing the conversion. Maybe you want to change from integer to string, maybe you want to change from integer to decimal, maybe from decimal to integer, maybe from date to integer, maybe, I don't care, it applies. Maybe from you wanna from date to string if you want to, or anything that you want to. The convert to function does that. Now, let's say you want to, after you do these, you want to do some calculations, some modifications. You can use the function that's called calculate. For example, if you want to add some values, you want to say this value plus this value is equal to this value, or you want to subtract, or you want to divide, or you want to take part of this something, okay? You use the calculate function. The calculate is mostly used in all our event functions. So what the calculate function does, it takes a column and it stores it in another column, maybe in the same row or in another row, but by doing some stuff to it before storing it, okay? Like adding. So you're adding, you're multiplying the discount times the price and getting a discount value, and taking that discount value and taking it away from the price. All these kind of things that you can do with the calculate. Maybe setting something at the beginning of the, after you insert some, before you insert something, you want to set a value directly into a column using the calculate function. The calculate function is very similar to the SQL column, but it's much more agile. Now, once you do that, sometimes you want to go back to the database to write this information. If you are doing it while doing edit, for example, you don't need to go and do SQL update, because the kernel does the SQL update for you. You don't need to do the SQL select, because once you do the edit, the first thing that the kernel does, it does the SQL select, so it brings data from the database to the corresponding memory row. Then it allows you, will take these data and will allow you to edit them in a form. Once you finish the editing in the form and you press OK, the values are brought back from the form to this memory row, and an SQL update function is called on a table. Only on a table. SQL update the standard item table, or SQL update the document table, or SQL update whatever table you're working with. This SQL update, what does it do? It takes whatever data found here, or in this, or in any, whatever corresponding table, row, and will take that row and will write it back to SQL. It says exec table UPD, the update. This is a stored procedure. This is a stored procedure, like there is a stored procedure called table cell for every table. So we have 127 different stored procedures for the select. We have 127 different stored procedures for the update, because SQL, we don't write dynamic SQL. We use static SQL, compiled SQL for very fast access to the database and for security, because we don't want to generate SQL on the fly. We use parameterized queries that are stored procedures, and we pass to this. We pass all the columns of the table. So if this has 10 columns, we pass the 10 columns. If this has 5 columns, we'll pass the 5 columns. Whatever columns we have here, that stored procedure is perfectly aligned with that. Once the SQL update is done, what you did, you selected something to this place, you calculated values with it. So I gave you a way to modify the values inside it. The user interface in Prosper would allow you to modify in a user interface in a form what do you want to do, and the SQL update will do the updating, will take these values that you wrote and will send it to the database. The SQL update most of the time works, but sometimes if it violates some constraint, for example, if some values are missing and it will not allow you to go to the database. If some values are duplicate, it will not allow you to go to the database. So whatever it does its own, every SQL does its own calculations. One thing we need to say about the SQL Select. Sometimes we do SQL Select. The kernel does an SQL Select for you. Sometimes you have to do the SQL Select. But since I cannot guarantee if you're doing an SQL Select and I've done it before, or the kernel have done it before you, so it's the same. When you say select this UID, I write this UID here, the value of this UID here, and I go and select it. So I'm selecting from this table where UID equal this. If you're doing select again for the same UID, I say, hey, you're doing this, or we've already done that, so you don't have, I don't go to SQL Select, I come back without anything, because that row contains already that value, right? But if you want to force that, if you want to force me to go to SQL every time without considering the last value that was selected, you could say SQL Select, force means you're forcing me to go to SQL even if the last value that was selected is the same value, right? Let's say you went to SQL and you're looking for value 100, and value 100 exists. So I filled all these rows, all these columns with the corresponding columns from the SQL table where UID is 100. Let's say you said, give me the 101. If the 101 doesn't exist, what do? And you do SQL Select 101. I take the 100 from here and I put the 101. I go to SQL, there is no SQL. You have an inconsistent row. The UID is 101, but the data belongs to the 100 UID, not the 101. That's why there is something called zero. Means if you don't find the row, please zero the whole table, means empty that row so we don't get wrong data. So this is your responsibility when you call the SQL Select. If you either need to handle the not on success, on error, or you need to force it to 0 when you're done. There is one more SQL function that we need, which is called the Sql Verify. Sometimes we don't have the UID for every row. For example, I don't have the UID for an address. This vendor has multiple addresses and I need his shipping address. I know the vendor and I know that the type of address is shipping, but I don't know the UID of that address. How do I go and get it from the database? Here I use the Sql Verify function. When I don't have a UID, I have an Sql Verify function. And this Sql Verify function, it says it runs an exec table var function, and it takes different parameters depending on the table. If the key for that table is the name, you only need to pass it the name. If the key of that table is the object UID and the name, you need to pass it the object UID and the name. But since we cannot pass more than one parameter in one column, in one place, there is a function called Sql Set that we use it. We say, take a value from here and set it in the table, comma, column. So we'll take this value and we'll write it in that table column. What do I mean in that table column? In the corresponding memory row, means right in this column this much. For example, if we're talking about address and it has the key value, the key of that, the unique key is on name and standard item UID, I need to pass the name and the standard item UID. So the SQL Verify will pass one of them. I need to use the SQL Set to pass another one. So the SQL Set on the, for example, standard item name, and the SQL Verify, I use it on a table, comma, column, which is the standard item UID or the standard item name. The SQL Verify will go and will select. This will do select top 1 star from this table where name is equal to this and standard item UID equal to this, depending if the key is name and standard item UID, right? So what we covered the 1, we covered the 2, we covered the 3, we covered 4, and we covered 5. These are the 5 SQL functions that you, as a Prosper expert, can access the database. This is what it means. First, you select the row. You get it from the database. You get it from the database, and you get it into a memory row. This is what the SQL Select does. The SQL Update, what does it do? SQL Verify does the same thing. It takes also the same thing as SQL Select, but instead of going by UID, it's going by the key. Sometimes the key is the name, sometimes it's a multiple key, 1, 2, or 3 columns, depends on what table we're talking about. So we said the SQL Verify and the SQL Select do almost the same thing, only the way of calling them is different. The SQL Set it's called SQL Set, but doesn't go to the database. This doesn't go to the database. It only takes a value from a column and write it in another column. Okay, to prepare for update or to prepare for SQL update for Verify. We said the SQL update, it takes whatever row you have here, whatever values in that row, and will write them to database. It's your responsibility to make sure that here there exists the correct data that you want to send to the database. So this is